Colleagues, this is a very great pleasure for me to deal about this very interesting topic, hamstring injury management, and especially sprinting as a piece of the injury risk management puzzle. Sorry for not being in live. If you have any question, do not hesitate to send me an email. You can also follow our work on Twitter. Please find my username. I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me in this presentation and allow me to share with you all this interesting reflection. This work is a teamwork from a complementarity multidisciplinary team. We are physicians, physio, sports scientists from different field, sports background, and this is the quality of the team to have this complementary view on the problem. First of all, I have no conflict of interest to declare. I had just to mention that I am associate editor without any honoraria for British Journal Sports Medicine, BMG Open Sports and Exercise Medicine. I'm also a member of 3 journals. I'm the scientific advisor for the European Athletics and eventually receive honoraria for my specific scientific mission. And I have fundings from the French Research Agency regarding a project on muscle injuries. So, what about hamstring injury management? We have some knowledge that some multifactorial program or specifically Nordic hamstring exercise or balance exercise can influence on the risk of hamstring injuries and especially decrease this risk of hamstring injury. But we also have the information that hamstring injuries still exist. This study from Ekstrand and collaborator showed that there was an increase in hamstring injury risk from the start of the 20s to 2014. And this recent publication shows that all injuries decrease except muscle injuries. There was no specific analysis about hamstring injuries, but muscle injuries in general keep the same injury rate. All this information shows us that there is a need to continue and to improve our hamstring injury management. We are dealing about hamstring injuries, and if we look at some movies, we can see that hamstring injury often arrive during sprinting. A recent study performed by Grunwald and collaborator reported with injury patterns analyzed with video, reported that half of the injury occurred during sprinting. So it seems that it often occurs during sprinting. What means sprinting? There are different definitions about sprinting, and the one that we are using with the group is running with the intention of maximal acceleration and or velocity. But in the literature, you can find some papers saying athlete is sprinting with a cutoff of more than 24 km per hour. But if you look at the performance when you are running faster or at 24 kilometers. 24 kilometers per hour means 6.7 meters per second. So the time in the 100 meter is 15 seconds. This is not a sprinting time. You cannot find any sprinters at the department level who run 15 seconds at the 100 meter. This is not sprinting. And if you look at the time on the 1,500 meter, it is 4 minutes 15 seconds. So this is a good time, but not a national level time. So running at 24 kilometers is not sprinting when we discuss and we look at the track and field performance. So if you are running at 9 meters per second, this is about 32.4 kilometers per hour. The time on 100 meters is 11:1. So this is a good time, not a national level, but a good time. Here, of course, I'm dealing about malperformance. So with this time, this is the start of sprinting. And when you look at the time on the 1,500 meters, 3 minutes 18 seconds. So this is under the world record. So this is not realistic. So we can consider that this is sprinting. So we are close to sprinting when we are sprinting when we are running at 9 meters per second. And just to continue this information, the mean time on 100 meters for the world record is 10 meters 0.4 seconds. So this is 36.3 kilometers per hour. And you look at the time at 1,500 meters, it is unrealistic. So here clearly this is sprint. What means sprinting on hamstrings? We have information from the literature reporting the constraint on the hamstring muscles due to running at different speeds, and running during sprinting. This very interesting experimental studies from Dorn and collaborators 2012 used a musculoskeletal model to calculate the constraint on the hamstring. They asked some participants to run on a treadmill at different velocities, increased velocities, and they analyze the constraint on the muscle. Here you can find some information. There are more in the article, and I think that it is a very good reading, so do not hesitate to have a look. Here we look at the two parts highlighted in red. These are the peak forces developed by muscle, for hamstring specifically, and the mechanical work produced by hip muscle in swimming, and here we have also the hamstring highlighted. I selected only two speeds, 7 meters per second and 9 meters per second. So 7 is sometimes considered as sprinting in literature, but as I explained you before, this is about 24 kilometers per hour, so not so fast. And 9 meters per second, here we are in sprinting. When we look at the constraint on the hamstring muscle between the two speeds, the constraint double, multiplied by 2. Another representation of this value. Here we have the running velocity in the x-axis and the peak force developed by the muscle in the y-axis. When the running velocity increased by 30%, the peak forces developed by the muscle increase by 100%. So this is 1.3 times more for running velocity, 2 times more for peak forces developed by the muscle. So the increase in constraint on the hamstring muscles is not linear with the running velocity. So you increase more the constraint on the muscle than the velocity. This is a very important point for the rest of the reflection, because when we think at sprinting, if you make your athlete run at 90%, when he will be at 100%, this is not 10 points more. This will be more than double the constraint. So the increase is not linear with the increase of the velocity, and the aim will be to prepare the hamstring muscle to the maximal velocity. And for that, if you are not so close to the maximal velocities, you will be far from the maximal velocity in terms of constraint. So you have to prepare to the velocity, to prepare the organ to the action that it is to serve and to do. So you have to make it sprint if you want to prepare to sprint, and you have to make it running at maximal velocity if you want to prepare to maximal velocity. Why should we consider sprinting as a piece of the hamstring injury risk management puzzle? I will provide some arguments, not exhaustive, but a list to include sprinting as a piece of the hamstring injury risk management puzzle. First of all, sprinting is one of the injury mechanisms, and according to the study, this is 2/3, 90–80% of injury occurring during sprinting or high-speed running. Regarding the exact mechanism, there are some discussion. More studies found that it is a late swing phase, but nothing is very clear for now. There are other mechanisms, stretching, shooting, jumping, but indeed, sprinting is one of the important mechanisms. By so, maybe we can play on this mechanism to improve injury risk management, as we are doing for ACL injury, ankle sprain, in which we are trying to improve the movement, improve the sporting gesture, the sporting movement to decrease the injury risk. This has been discussed by Koenige and Grégoire Millet some time ago. They were looking at the sprinting motion and trying to find which exercise could be relevant because this exercise could mimic sprinting. So the aim was to target the injury mechanism by an exercise which will be able to mimic the injury mechanism to prepare the muscle to the exercise. Some sprinting parameters have been associated with hamstring injury. In the very recent literature review on risk factor of hamstring injury, among the different risk factors reported, running-based injury risk factors have been reported, and I will detail some in the next slides. Some factors were kinematics. So an example is the anterior pelvic tilt. Scheuermans and collaborator reported that people who have some frontal and sagittal problem with pelvic control, and especially an anterior pelvic tilt, have higher risk to have hamstring injury during the next season. So a poor pelvic control, and especially an anterior pelvic tilt, was reported as a risk factor of a new hamstring injury during the coming season. Regarding kinetics and the horizontal force production capacity during sprint acceleration, we performed a prospective cohort study over almost 300 football players, professional, semi-professional, from different countries, France, Finland, and Japan. They were asked to do a sprint, maximal sprint, during which we measured the horizontal force production capacity at slow velocity, F0, and at fast velocity, V0. We collected all hamstring injury during the season, and then we performed some Cox regression analysis. First, we analyzed the association between the first measurement of horizontal force production capacity at slow and fast velocity and the injuries during the season. Here we found no association between a horizontal force measurement at the start of the season and an injury during the season. Then we performed another analysis. We analyzed for each measurement the association with potential hamstring injury just before the measurement, just after the measurement, and before the next measurement. So we took the measurement and we look at what hamstring injury occurred during the period before the next measurement. Here we found a statistical significant association, and when F0, so horizontal force production capacity at low velocity, when this horizontal force production at low velocity F0 decreased, there was an increased risk, almost 3 times, of hamstring injury during the period after. This was during the 1 to 3 months. We conducted another study on another population, Finnish population, about 100 players. They have different tests, lumbopelvic, posterior chain strength, range of motion, and sprint mechanics with F0. At the start and at the middle of the season, we did some analysis. We analyzed all these tests, lumbopelvic, posterior chain strength, range of motion, sprint mechanicals. You have the detail in the article. With the Cox regression, we analyzed the association with the injury occurring during the entire season. Here, the association was not significant for any of the tests, but close to with the sprint mechanical output, F0, with 3 times more risk when the F0 was lower. As for the previous study, we did a Cox regression analysis by analyzing what happened after the first test and before the second, so shorter period to be closer to the mechanical variables that are measured. So here the association was significant, 4 times more risk when the F0 decreased. So this was an argument to include horizontal force production capacity, and especially at low velocity, F0, as one of the injury risk factors of hamstring injuries. Another argument of the link between sprinting and hamstring injury is exposure. There are some studies reporting a link, an association between sprint exposure and hamstring injury risk. This study from Malone and collaborator, published in 2017, reported that an optimal exposure to maximal or near maximal running velocity is suggested as a protective injury risk factor, not especially hamstring, but all lower limb muscle injuries. In this study on hamstring strain injury, an acute increase in sprinting volume has been associated with markedly increased hamstring injury risk. And this narrative review from Hogan and collaborator in 2019 reported that the lack of regular preparatory sprint training may induce a higher risk of sprint-related injury. So, conclusion of this different study could be interpreted as, or we interpreted as, it is important to prepare the organ to the function to which it is to serve. And the last argument is that sprinting is the only exercise able to activate hamstring muscles as height I Springting, there are two studies dealing about that. The first was from Van den Tiller in 2017. They analyze the muscle activation of different hamstring muscles. Here is the biceps femoris during different exercise in gray, and during sprinting was 100%, and they reported that none of the exercise were able to activate the hamstring muscle as high as the sprinting. So if you want to prepare the muscle to sprint regarding EMG activity, the only exercise which is able to activate as high as sprint is sprint. We reproduced this study because the results were so important for practice that we would like to be sure that this is reproducible and we can find the same. We chose different exercise. We normalize the EMG activity of this exercise with the sprint, 100% for sprint. And we reported the same thing. None of the exercise were able to activate the hamstring muscle, biceps femoris or semitendinous, as high as sprinting. Now, how can we proceed to include sprinting as a part of the hamstring injury risk management? First of all, sprinting is not one new magical exercise or strategy. Sprinting should be included in the management as an additional piece. In a comprehensive and multifactorial approach, this is important to have in mind that injuries and hamstring injuries are multifactorial injuries with biological, physical, psychological and sociological approach context. So this is one of the different pieces in this injury risk management. We think that this approach should be individualized. Each athlete is different with different deficiencies, capacities, so it is important to individualize the approach. In addition, we think that it is important to contextualize the approach, to make the approach appropriate to the specific context, sporting context, environmental context, cultural context, and so and so. Therefore, we reflected at a model, a conceptual approach with, in addition to the appropriate individual conceptualized program, an appropriate approach to present the program to the athlete. We think that maximizing individualization, maximizing the presentation of the program to the population, maximizing the individualization of the program itself would be interesting to improve the adherence and the effectiveness of the program. Please do not hesitate to read this editorial about this new approach. So now we will move on practice. In practice, we suggest to use a pragmatic loop. We took inspiration from the tip loop from O'Brien, and this loop has been published in an editorial during this summer in the BGSM. So in this pragmatic loop, 2 steps. First step, evaluation. Evaluation of the different elements of the link between sprinting and hamstring. So we think that it is important to evaluate the structure, the flexibility, the strength, and then to move on the reported risk factor, sprinting kinetics, sprinting kinematics, and sprinting exposure. This evaluation will depend on the time, on the human's availability, on what you can do, what time you have to do such evaluation. Evaluation can only be 1 or 2 aspects of the proposed aspect, but also could be more larger. After the evaluation, we suggest to do an intervention and to plan it at the individual level. For this intervention, we suggest to first work on the form and then on the load. So first improve the sprinting kinematics. How do you manage with pelvic? And when the athlete is able to run correctly, we suggest to improve the load, increase the sprinting exposure, increase the strength. For the intervention, we also suggest to improve progressively the intensity, the volume, and then the load, with diversity and variation in the approach, exercise, velocity, load. Make it regular with periodization, recovery of more than 48 hours between maximal sprinting, and regular exposure to maximal sprinting through the season. And then to reproduce the loop with new evaluation, new intervention, individual, and so and so. Regarding structure and technique, these are important to prepare the structure to sprinting, but also to prepare the technique to make the sprint efficient, to decrease the load on the muscle, and by so decrease the risk of injury. Another thing that seems important for us is the regular and progressive increase of exposure to the risk factor, so sprinting here, to build up immunity for sprinting-related hamstring injuries. So this is what has been called mithridatization. So the increase progressively in the poison to make the body able to manage with it. There are some proposals in the literature of program. So here we published a protocol, multifactorial musculoskeletal and approach with different evaluation and then a program appropriate during the different part of the football season, different tests, including spring mechanical output, and then different exercise and program to train to sprint according to the deficiencies and to make it improve. In this narrative review, Delphi Consensus author reported some tips to include sprinting as a part of the training of football teams and professional football teams. I ask you to have a look at these two articles if you need some practical information. So to implement sprinting training can allow improve sprinting performance, we hope, and there are some evidence, and probably also to reduce hamstring injuries with the consequence of improving performance, we hope also. So this seems to be a win-win performance prevention approach. We started to reflect about that 5 years ago. We published a first blog about that, sprint vaccine, but vaccine is not a good term. And we recently published this editorial in the BGSM by better precising what we have in mind. We provide some tips and practical information, so do not hesitate to have a look at it. And the take-home message of that is sprint. So to prevent injuries, hamstring injuries during sprinting, prepare to sprint. So prepare, train the athlete to sprint, run at maximal velocities with the different information as I presented in the intervention. The aim is to have a plurifactorial, plurimodal individual approach, physically, psychologically, contextually, including easily safe lifestyle, context, facilitator and barrier on the implementation, education. Repair and rehabilitate all injuries, and with a sprint-oriented strategy from earliest stage to maximal capacity recovering Increase the capacity of the tissue by strengthening, stretching, sensory-motor control. Not negligent, pay attention to pain, fatigue, take care properly. And then train smartly, individually adapt the monitor, the load to increase progressively volume and intensity. Of course, all these suggestions should now be evaluated scientifically. There is a need to know if such proposals are efficient. They come from hypotheses, pathophysiologically and experience, and some experimental study, and now we have to know if they can reduce the risk of hamstring injuries. As a remember, this pragmatic loop, evaluation, intervention, reevaluation, that you can find in the editorial. I would like to thank you for your attention. I was happy to present the reflections that we have with the colleagues for many years. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to send me an email, and do not hesitate to follow our work on Twitter. Many thanks.